I don't normally say this, but I think for this episode specifically, it would be really, really good to watch this one because I'm going to be including photos and videos from our travels and places that we went to. Obviously, you can listen and you're still going to get the same amount of information, but I think if you want to actually see the things that we saw and understand what the city looks like a bit more, then I'd recommend watching it. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Amelie Maran Podcast. Today we're going to do something a bit different. I've decided to add this new segment where I'm going to take you through the itinerary that we did through Central and South America and kind of focus on one place at a time. And today we're going to start with Mexico City because it's where the entire journey started. I also think Mexico City in itself is such a vibrant place. It's got so much history and I feel like it really caters to every kind of traveler, even if you just want to go there for a holiday. It's such an amazing place to be. So let's get started. Let me start by why I think starting in Mexico City is going to be the best place to start your Central America journey. I personally wanted to start in Cancun, kind of Tulum area, which is the very, very east of Mexico. And once I kind of researched it a bit more and understood what there was to do in Cancun versus Mexico City, it kind of became really obvious that Mexico City is the place to be, and it's a really, really good start point. It's the capital of the country and there's so much to do there. Whereas with Cancun, I feel like it's very, very touristy. You've got a lot of people there that aren't backpacking and you've got a lot of people that are there to enjoy the resorts and not really do the historical stuff. And also, you have to do a lot of traveling inland to go and do anything historical and see the historical sites. And so for us, Mexico City felt like a better centerpiece, a good foundation. It was also a cheaper flight, if I'm honest. It led us into the next part of our journey really nicely and really easily. Also, if you're a really big fan of walking, I would say Mexico City is one of the most accessible cities. It is so easily walkable. Granted, you will be obviously walking for a long time. They do have the buses and the metro and things like that. But for us, we found that walking was obviously an easier way for us to see the city and a lot cheaper. Also meant we were getting our steps in, which was always good. And one thing to know is that Uber is extremely cheap compared to the UK out in Mexico City. And so even a 20-minute journey could cost you £3 or something. My first tip when you're going to Mexico is to probably try, if you can, get a flight that is not going to land at 4 a.m. because the flight that we got landed at 4 a.m. and we couldn't check into our hotel until 1 or 2 p.m. We spent the entire morning completely jet lagged trying to find something to do in the city. We walked for probably about 3 hours, just going around, walking to the center square and stopping off at food carts and things like that. And I think if you can get a flight that coincides with your check-in time, it would be so much easier. Life would be so much easier. I also recommend staying somewhere nice for the first few days. The jet lag really, really hit us. I mean, we were absolutely conked out for the first 2 days. I don't know why, because the jet lag from the UK is not that bad. It's like 6 hours or something. So I don't know why, but for some reason it just really threw us off. And I would really recommend, you don't have to stay in like 5-star, hotel. Like by all means, we did not do that. But I think somewhere that's a bit more comfortable, it allows you to settle in and also adjust to the altitude because Mexico City is around about 2,000 meters above sea level and you can experience really bad altitude sickness from that. We were really lucky and we didn't have it too bad or anything, but I think that also was because we slept so much at the beginning of the journey because we were absolutely exhausted. So I think you should really give yourself some time to adjust, and it would obviously be more ideal to do it somewhere where it's a bit nicer, you've got like a nice bed, you don't have to worry about your belongings just yet and like keeping things safe, and you can just trust the hotel and everything's there for you. And for us, it was just a nice adjustment. And it was our first place out of many on this massive trip that we were doing. Just a heads up, I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of these names of places, so please forgive me, I'm trying my best. Starting off with Mexico City, it has such a rich history, and I really did not know that prior to going. I had no idea of how much history there was there, but there is so much to soak up, especially if you're going to Mexico City just for a holiday, going for a week or something, and you really want to see the historical sites. There is so much to go and see. The first place, and I guess the main place, is the main square, which is called Zocalo. Right next door you have Templo Mayor, which is the Aztec remains. And in the main square in this area, you have so many statues, you have loads of pre-Hispanic and colonial history. It's so fascinating, and it's obviously aesthetically absolutely beautiful. There was also this thing in the main square that Sam went and did where you could go and get blessed by these people, and I guess you would call it saged, and they would put all these aromas around you, they would, chuck things on you. It was something to do with clearing the negative energy or any bad spirits, and I think it was the start of our travels, so Sam was like, I want to do it just to start us off on a good note. Whether it's real or not, it makes you feel better. That was really interesting, and it was something we hadn't obviously planned to do or see. Then you have Chapultepec Castle, which I think was one of my favorite things that we did, even though I actually wasn't that crazy about going, because I think we'd had a really long day, and Sam just said we should go and check out this castle. I've seen it on TikTok, I've seen people talk about it, and I was very, it's up a hill, I really don't want to go, but it was one of my favorite things that we did. You go up into this public park, and it's this castle on top of the hill. It's about £4.50 to get in, or if you're a student, you can go free. And the castle itself is a symbol of Mexican independence, which I've since learned since being there, because I didn't know that. All of the signs were in Spanish, and I obviously was trying to read them and translate them best as possible, but it's all about history and things that I don't know about and didn't really understand. So we did a lot of research after we'd gone to kind of understand where we'd been. It's really, really beautiful. There's a few levels to the castle. You can completely explore it. It's all free reign. And one thing that was really cool was at the top, there is a fountain that you can throw coins in and make a wish with this gorgeous view of Mexico City. And I felt like that was a really special moment where you really pause and try and take in this insane view. And then of course you have the Frida Kahlo Museum, which I was so gutted we couldn't go to, because obviously you didn't realise, but you have to book so far in advance. I think if we were doing Mexico City as a trip and had maybe planned it out a bit more instead of kind of backpacking it, we might have been able to book tickets. I can't tell you how expensive they are or what it's like to go to the museum, but it's obviously a house and art museum dedicated to Frida Kahlo and her life and her work. It's in a gorgeous, gorgeous neighborhood, which I'll tell you more about later because they also have incredible markets there, but it looked absolutely beautiful. And I've researched some photos of inside just to understand maybe what it would have been like. And yeah, I was really, really gutted we couldn't go, but I think it's a definite must-see if you go to Mexico City. Now my favorite part is the food in Mexico is unreal, absolutely one of my favorite cuisines. You had all the tacos, you had quesadillas, you had burritos, churros, tostadas. It was just unbelievable. And there were so many food markets. There are food stands everywhere selling this food. It always feels like the street stands are just going to be so much better than a restaurant because it's more authentic. It's also where all the locals are going and you can see everybody lining up to get their food. And for us, that was such a validation that, no, this is the best place to go and get food. We don't need to pay more money just to sit in a restaurant. Absolutely loved all of the street food. It's also so much cheaper and just feels so much more authentic. The two big markets that we went to that I would 100% recommend you go to is Mercado de la Merced, Mercado de Coyoacan. I'm really trying with my pronunciation, so bear with me. But there we ate tacos, we ate quesadillas, and lots of tostadas, because what was really interesting to us was when you go to these big markets, and I'm talking huge markets, like blocks and blocks and blocks of markets, everybody sits down together at these family-style tables and people will be cooking and then it's a case of just passing you the food on the table. There's lots of dip and lots of add-ins for your meal on the table for everyone to share. Everybody sits shoulder to shoulder, and we absolutely loved this part of the culture because it means that you get to speak to people. We started using our Spanish in these locations and it was just so lovely. It just felt really homely, really warm, and the food is so good. I could eat it any day. It was honestly amazing. And it's so nice to be able to watch them prepare it and see what they do to make the tacos and the burritos and things like that, because they're making it all from scratch there and then. And I think it felt really lovely to see it being made and then being able to eat it. And it was such an enjoyable experience. And of course, those margaritas everywhere. I mean, every single bar, restaurant, even some cafes, all did margaritas and did them extremely cheaply. I mean, it was quite worrying probably how many margaritas we had. And then of course you have to have your churros, obviously, which was extremely common. You had churro stands everywhere and you would go up to a stand and they would ask you if you wanted it filled with the chocolate or you wanted to dip it in the chocolate. And there were so many variations. You could get cinnamon churros, you could get sugar coated, you could get plain. And what I thought was really cool actually was that there were loads of vegan options for churros, which I didn't think about because I'm not vegan. And I thought it was really nice that it's really inclusive in Mexico City. There's so many vegan options for people. And as someone who is not vegan, it's not something I really think about, if I'm honest. And it was really nice to see on the menu that you could get vegan churros, burritos, tacos, everything. They really cater to that diet because a lot of Mexican dishes are obviously meat based. And I thought it was really lovely to be able to see everybody being able to enjoy all of the food. Now for my hidden gems in Mexico City. There are definitely a few hidden gems that we found, and we actually found them from recommendations on YouTube. I think Sam had just typed in what to do in Mexico City and we watched a few videos. We got some ideas from these videos. It showed us places that maybe people don't know so much about. Maybe they're not as touristy, but the one that we were absolutely blown away by was just next to the center square. There is a Sears store department, which I feel is actually quite random now I think about it. It's a bit odd. There's all these Aztec remains, there's loads of colonial statues, and then suddenly you have this Sears department store. But anyway, you go up to the 8th floor and there is a cafe, a hidden cafe in the department store, and you can sit down and it's this balcony and it overlooks this gorgeous cathedral, and you can just have a coffee. They did actual food like sandwiches and things like that, and it's a really lovely place to just sit and observe and kind of people watch, but you've got this amazing view as well. And it's not something I've seen advertised. I saw a few TikToks on it. It was so beautiful and just such a nice hidden gem to find. I would recommend going earlier in the day because once it gets to a certain point, it's quite busy. Because whilst I think it's a hidden gem, a lot of tourists are starting to find out about it because people obviously post about it, and it can get quite busy and you have to wait in line and things like that. But for us, we went at a time when it wasn't too busy, and so we were seated very quickly. We were able to have our cup of coffee, like look at the view, and it was just really special, really lovely. And we did that on our first day when we were in Mexico City. Another hidden gem is something that I think is very well known in Mexico City, but I think there's parts to it that people maybe don't know. So I'm talking about the cable car that goes through Mexico City. There is a line that goes from the center to different neighborhoods, because the only way I can describe it is Mexico City's kind of in a valley in a way, and so there are loads of houses up the side of the valley or the mountain, I guess, and so people use this cable car to get to those neighborhoods. But what people don't know about those neighborhoods is they are very rough, and we were recommended to not get off the cable car. You just kind of do the cable car for the cable car ride and for the view, and then don't get off and just swing back round, if that makes sense. You don't want to stop off and view these neighborhoods, only because you're very clearly a tourist and they're known as the rougher areas. So what we did was we just bought a travel card and literally just went, I think it took about an hour, 45 minutes. You just go around the whole circuit and then come back to the center, and that's a really great starting point, obviously, to go and do other things in Mexico City. But the number one piece of advice we got was just don't get off and try and explore these towns or these areas, because you are very obviously a tourist and they will target you. That's one thing to keep in mind. You just have to stay on the cable car. And then of course you have all of the hidden markets and loads of craft things being sold all through the street, lots of art everywhere on the walls and things like that. And those are nice hidden gems that I couldn't specify a place to go and see those, apart from obviously the big markets I've told you about. You just kind of come across them as you're walking around Mexico City or near the center. And when you stumble upon them, they're obviously so nice to explore and just check them out, see what's being sold or see what paintings there are, or just have a chat with some of the locals, see what they've made. They sell a lot of baked goods as well, which was really lovely in these markets, especially smaller markets. You have people that have just genuinely at home baked these goods and they're out there selling them, and they are so, so good. Now, this is the part where I feel like people are really going to want to listen and take note, and that is talking about the safety of Mexico City. People have this preconception that Mexico City is very unsafe, and obviously there are parts that are unsafe, but I would say in general during the day, Mexico City is a pretty safe place. Also, when you're doing the touristy things, it's always crowded where you are, essentially, so you don't feel too targeted or singled out. Obviously, you still need to make sure that you're not flashing your phone and make sure you have your phone tucked away, your wallet, passport, things like that. But I feel like in those kind of situations, you feel a bit safer because there are people around. No one's going to try and pull anything. We stayed in Roma Norte, which is kind of western part of Mexico City. I think it's one of the more popular neighborhoods that people go to when they stay. It's a really good base for going out and seeing the sights, which obviously we didn't actually know at the time when we booked our hotel. And in general, I feel like it was quite a safe neighborhood. The only time Mexico City does feel unsafe is at night, which I feel like isn't surprising because most cities don't feel that safe at night. Nighttime was the only time where we would feel a bit like, okay, we need to be a bit more aware of ourselves. And to be honest, we didn't go out very much because we were so jet lagged that actually we would just fall asleep before it even got to the evening. So I can't speak too much on the nightlife in terms of going out to bars and going out clubbing or things like that. The general consensus of when it would get to evening was that I think we should go back. I'm not feeling too safe being too far away from our accommodation. There's also this thing in Mexico City which kind of terrified me, but we were told that police actually target you as tourists because they will stop you and say, you know, I need to check your ID or I need to check your passport or whatever, and then they will take money out of your wallet and kind of call that your bribe to be let go kind of thing. I guess like a ransom in a way or something. And so we were very conscious of that once we were told that, because that is an element of I really don't feel safe now because even the police are out, well, what it feels like is the police are out to get me. And so that is something to be aware of when you're going to Mexico City. Another thing to note as well is that if you smoke or if you vape, vaping is banned in Mexico altogether, I think. I don't think it's just Mexico City. As a country, they've banned vaping. They are working towards being one of the only countries that people don't smoke or something, which is very contradictory because a lot of people sold cigarettes and every street stand sells cigarettes individually or in a full packet. So I don't know how much people abide by this law. We did see some people smoking, but I can't say that it was a big thing. I didn't see lots of people smoking as though it was normal. It felt like people were very discreet when they did it. And so that's just a heads up. If you smoke or if you vape, you just want to keep it as discreet as possible. And some practical tips are that the weather is good in Mexico City from about November to April. And we went in January, where I think the weather was absolutely perfect for us. It was sunny, a bit cloudy sometimes, but it was hot enough that you could walk around in just a t-shirt or a t-shirt and jumper and thin trousers, and you weren't getting too hot because obviously, like I've said, we walked literally everywhere. So I think that period of time is the best to go. From what I've researched, November to April, you're going to have the nicest weather. And also some phone plans work out in Mexico, which I know is really, really random. The phone plan that I'm on at home in the UK worked out in Mexico. So the entire time we were in Mexico, I was able to have normal 4G. I was able to text normally as though I was at home. It obviously really helps for things like maps. And also if you're somewhere in the center of Mexico City and you don't know how to get to your next destination, you can just search it up. It also means that we would be able to search up things on TikTok or even just Google it and say, we're in this area, what is there to do in this area? So I would definitely check out with your phone company if you get access to data in Mexico City. It's really, really ideal. Okay, so final verdict for Mexico City from me is food and drink, 9 out of 10. Nightlife, 6 out of 10, only because of the safety. Otherwise, I can't really speak to it too much. History and culture, 9 out of 10. Accessibility, so like walking, public transport, Uber, and in terms of language, so English level, 9 out of 10. Pretty much everybody spoke English in this area, which was quite helpful because we were able to obviously communicate a bit better, but also in the areas where they didn't speak as much English, we were able to dish out a bit of our Spanish where we could, and that's where we started having to pick up a bit more Spanish to get us through the rest of the trip. Safety, 7 out of 10. Expenses, 7 out of 10. I obviously haven't included my expenses in Mexico City in this episode, but if that is something that people will be interested in, I obviously can be transparent about it and let everyone know how much we spent in Mexico City. I would say it's relatively cheaper than the UK, but it's a bit more expensive than other parts of Mexico. I think that's only because it's the capital and obviously it's a really, really touristy area. That's why I've rated it 7 out of 10, just because some things were pretty cheap and then some things were a bit more expensive. And overall, Mexico City gets an 8 out of 10. I absolutely loved Mexico City and I feel like it was such a nice transition from the UK to the first country of our trip. And I think because I also live in a city at home, it felt like quite a nice transition into a different country, and especially somewhere where English is not everybody's first language over there. It felt kind of like a home away from home with a twist, is how I can describe it. Mexico City is a must see. I think it's the best place to start your travels because it's so accessible to everything. If you want to go up to Cancun and you want to go and do the Chichen Itza and all of those historical sites, it's very accessible to sort of go down and come back up. Or if you want to explore more of Mexico, it's such a good foundation to have because you can get buses to anywhere from Mexico City because obviously it's the capital and it's the center of Mexico. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode. I thought it'd be nice to do something a bit different, and obviously I would love to take you through our entire travel itinerary. I don't know how long that will take, to be honest, but I'm really excited to share obviously what we did in each place and what there is to do from our experience. If you have any recommendations as well for Mexico City, then comment down below or let me know any other places that I can recommend to people. Or if you've been to Mexico City, I'd love to hear what you loved about it or what your favorite area was or your favorite attraction. It'd be really nice to share all of that. I'm thinking I'll do this all in chronological order, but obviously if there are certain places or certain countries that people want to hear about a lot more, then I will obviously do an episode about them. But thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it and I will see you next week. Bye.